Royal news. The royal family's official website was updated to reflect the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's children's new titles, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. Harry and Meghan's youngsters become a prince and princess on the accession of their grandfather, the King, 6 months ago. But the Sussexes publicly used Lily's title for the first time on Wednesday when announcing their daughter's christening. Also yesterday, Prince Edward was named as the new Duke of Edinburgh. So to discuss these stories, we're joined by royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Hadel-Manku. So where shall we start, Rafe?
Well, let's start with the most ridiculous story, of course, and that naturally involves Harry and Meghan, because this episode actually exposes how ridiculous and ignorant Meghan is, and how her ignorance actually resulted in that race storm that really engulfed the world and damaged the monarchy. Because you may remember that infamous interview she gave with Oprah Winfrey in 2021. And at that time, she was incredulous that her son Archie was not automatically a prince like Prince William's children. And she alleged at that time, she gave the impression that this was due to her son being mixed race, which was an outrageous calumny, against the royal family. Because as we now know, far from being a racist snub, the palace was simply following strict protocol. And, anybody with a smartphone and 10 minutes can go on Google and they could have found that out for themselves very easily. So why Meghan had to belabor this point of race is beyond me, because it's well established since 1917, King George V laid down that all of the male line grandchildren of the monarch become prince and princesses. But in terms of great-grandchildren, and in 2021, Archie was a great-grandchild, only the eldest son of the Prince of Wales's children become prince and princesses. So it was only with the Queen's death and King Charles' accession that Archie and Lilibet became eligible for these titles. And this is simply that protocol playing out. So whether it's deliberately or through complete stupidity, Meghan painted an entirely fictional picture around race. And I think that's quite despicable. And yet we've had no apology from the Sussexes again for allowing the royal family's reputation to be besmirched.
I don't think there will ever be an apology, Rafe, from what we've seen anyway. Now, some people have said this is fantastic. This is a sign of reconciliation. It's a sign of Meghan and Harry wanting some kind of reconciliation, essentially. I'm a little bit more cynical, a little bit more suspicious that essentially they just want the titles because it's beneficial to them, and they have essentially been not so nice to the royal family for a long time, and this is a bit of a cheek.
How dare you, Emily? Honestly, how can you be so cynical? Yeah, absolutely. Look, for a couple who is, seemingly so opposed to hierarchy and this class-ridden, protocol accepts, stultifying, elitist royal family, it's very funny how much they love these royal titles. And it's pure hypocrisy. Contrast this with Prince Edward. When his children were born, they were legally Prince and Princess of Wales automatically. However, he didn't give them those titles. They were raised with far more humble titles of Lord and Lady, because they wanted to ensure that their children had a much more grounded and down-to-earth upbringing. So why would Harry and Meghan want their children in the USA, which doesn't recognize titles, is actually as opposed to titles, why would they want their children to be so grandly raised as a prince and princess? Could it be because they know the social and commercial cachet that has? I don't know. It seems to me that they're sort of trying to become like aristocratic versions of David and Victoria Beckham, just trying to market their family and their children and sell their brand, even if it means that their children, are going to grow up like privileged brats, potentially.
So this isn't a sign that they may be planning a move back to Britain to take advantage of the titles?
I rather doubt it. They just had the christening. They just had the christening for Lilibet, and Omid Scobie, their lackey, said that an invitation was extended to the King and Prince William to attend, and they received the invitation but didn't attend. And I rather think we all hope that they do the same thing when it comes to the coronation.
Now, Rafe, lastly, you give your analysis and astute commentary on a variety of topics. Will you answer our question of the day on Real Britain, which is, was the BBC right to suspend Gary Lineker because of his tweets?
Yeah, I'll be a hypocrite if I didn't say that everyone has the right to free expression. But isn't it funny, that suddenly Britain's sports commentators are taking a moral stand on this issue? What happened to those morals, during the World Cup? They were very happy to pocket cash from the Qatari World Cup. I don't want to know, do they actually think that Gary Lineker, this millionaire's suspension from a TV show, is actually a greater outrage than the deaths and slave labor and the persecution of gays and women in Qatar? is utter hypocrisy. Lineker said a few unpleasant words about Qatar, but the fact is, for 4 years, he took money from Al Jazeera, which is owned by Qatar. That's $1.6 million, I think he got from there. Not once did we hear him protesting about that. Look, and I'd say that they've got a lot more in common with 1930s Germany than our government is. He's an independent man. He's a contractor. He's allowed to have free speech. But his Twitter profile was created on the back of his BBC status. He wouldn't have anywhere near as strong a following on Twitter were it not for his BBC position. When he speaks, people think of the BBC. So yes, he has the right to say what he wants to do, but the BBC has a right to uphold its guidelines, which he was warned in the past he mustn't violate. This is another strike against him. So I think that they were right here, even though we must protect, of course, the right to free speech.